I didn't catch my husband cheating in bed. I caught him cheating in court. The notification came through while I was standing in line for coffee, half awake, scrolling mindlessly. A legal database alert. My name tagged to a filing I'd never seen. Petition to transfer marital assets prior to dissolution. I read it once. Then again. By the time I reached the counter, my hands were shaking so badly I spilled coffee down my wrist and didn't feel the burn. Because the filing wasn't about money, it was about ownership. Specifically, the ownership of a private collection valued at over $1 million, a collection my husband had built his entire identity around, and the filing claimed I had no legal claim to any of it, which would have been strange if I hadn't helped acquire most of it, if I hadn't signed half the paperwork, if I hadn't been married to him for 11 years, and if the filing hadn't been dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before I knew he was planning to leave me. 3 weeks before I knew he was sleeping with someone else. I went home and opened his laptop. He was careless with passwords because he believed in intimidation over secrecy. I guessed it on the third try. What I found wasn't just an affair, it was a replacement. She wasn't a fling. She was already meeting his lawyers, already looped into future planning, already being trained to say the right things at dinners I used to attend. There were emails about timing, about how to manage the narrative. And then there was the attachment, a spreadsheet, asset movement, sale projections, a note in the margin that made my stomach drop. Once finalized, L will have no leverage. L, not me, her, Lila, his ex-wife, the woman he told me was unstable, the woman he said he'd handled. I sat on the floor for a long time after that, not crying, not screaming, just staring at the wall while the truth assembled itself piece by piece. The affair wasn't new, the divorce wasn't sudden, and the collection? The collection was the key to everything, because what Adrian never told anyone, not even me, was how he built it. I found that out by accident years ago when I noticed inconsistencies in provenance documents, gaps, dates that didn't line up, ownership histories that jumped continents too cleanly. When I asked him, he smiled and said, "That's just how high-end collecting works." That night, I opened the safe for the first time without him watching. Inside were objects people would kill for, and documents people would go to prison to hide. The collection wasn't just expensive, parts of it were dirty, which meant it wasn't just his pride, it was his shield. I called in sick the next day, then the next. I stayed home and read. Filings, old lawsuits, settlement agreements sealed by money and silence. That's how I found Lila, not the version Adrian described, but the one buried in footnotes. She hadn't been unstable, she'd been silenced. And the collection? It had been part of the settlement he violated. I finally understood why he was moving assets now, why he was cheating now, why he was rushing. Because if Lila ever spoke publicly, with evidence, everything collapsed, including him. That night, Adrian came home smelling like expensive perfume and confidence. He kissed my forehead and asked how my day was. "Quiet," I said. He smiled, relieved. That was the night I made my first move. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn him. I emailed one person, an appraiser who had once hinted he knew more than he should. I wrote 3 sentences. Hypothetical question. If items from the A collection were sold publicly, how fast would provenance be scrutinized? Asking for personal reasons. He replied 11 minutes later. Fast enough to destroy someone. I slept better than I had in months. The next week was a performance. I watched Adrian grow tense as transfers stalled, watched him take calls in another room, watched him snap at me for leaving a light on. He was losing control. He didn't know why yet. I contacted Lila on a burner phone. She answered immediately. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," she said. We met 2 days later. She didn't thank me. She didn't hug me. She looked at me like someone evaluating a weapon. "Do you know what happens if you sell it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied. "Then you understand what you're risking." I did, because selling the collection wouldn't just hurt Adrian, it would expose us all. And I was ready. What I didn't know, what she didn't tell me yet, was that Adrian was already on to me. He didn't accuse me at first. That was the mistake I would have made. Adrian got quiet, too quiet. He started coming home earlier, watching me from across rooms, asking casual questions with sharpened edges. Questions about my day, about who I'd spoken to, about why I'd suddenly taken an interest in organization. I answered perfectly, because while he was trying to confirm his suspicion, I was racing the clock. The move he made almost worked. It happened on a Thursday morning, 3 days after I met Lila. 2 officers knocked on my door while Adrian conveniently worked from home upstairs. They were polite, apologetic even. There had been a report, an allegation of attempted asset fraud, my name attached to a pending investigation involving high-value items with questionable provenance. They asked if I'd like to come downtown to answer a few questions. Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs, phone in hand, wearing concern like a tailored suit. I understood instantly. He wasn't going to divorce me quietly anymore. He was going to discredit me. At the station, they laid it out. Anonymous tip. Claims I was attempting to liquidate assets I didn't own. Suggestions of coercion, instability, emotional distress. The subtext was clear. Unreliable wife, possible breakdown. Watch her closely. I walked out without charges, but not without damage. By the time I got home, my bank had flagged transfers. My access to certain accounts was temporarily restricted. Adrian sat at the kitchen table, waiting. "You should have told me you were feeling overwhelmed," he said gently. "This kind of stress can make people do things they don't fully understand." That was when I realized something important. He thought I was bluffing. He believed fear would snap me back into place. That night, I didn't sleep. I called Leela at 2:11 a.m. and told her everything. She didn't sound surprised. "He always does this first," she said carefully. "Character assassination before legal annihilation." "I might lose access," I said. "If he locks me out completely—" "You won't," she interrupted, "because he needs you functional a little longer." She was right. The next morning, Adrian handed me a document, a post-nuptial agreement, presented as protection, framed as reassurance. If I signed, everything would stabilize. I smiled and asked for time. Then I did something he never anticipated. I went public without going public. Using accounts Adrian didn't know existed, I tipped 2 investigative journalists who specialized in art restitution and financial misconduct. I didn't accuse, I didn't reveal names. I asked questions, hypothetical ones. What happens when disputed items re-enter the market? What obligations follow collections built during contested divorces? What protections exist for silenced spouses? They started digging. Adrian felt it immediately. Calls intensified, meetings canceled. One buyer backed out of a separate deal unrelated to me. The pressure made him sloppy. He confronted me 2 nights later, anger finally breaking through his control. "You talked," he said. I met his eyes. "You lied." That was when he made his second mistake. He threatened Leela. Indirectly, through intermediaries, through the kind of pressure that leaves fingerprints only if you know where to look. She forwarded everything to me. And with that, the last piece fell into place. Because what Adrian still didn't know was that Leela hadn't just survived him, she'd studied him. Years ago, during her divorce, she'd quietly filed claims he assumed were dismissed. They weren't. They were suspended, waiting for a trigger. Selling the collection was that trigger. But not all at once, not recklessly. The first sale went live under a charity auction banner tied to cultural preservation. One item, mid-tier, clean enough to pass initial scrutiny. It sold in minutes. The second sale triggered questions. The third triggered audits. By the fourth, Adrian's lawyers were scrambling. Then the journalists published, not an exposé, a timeline, carefully sourced, calmly written, impossible to ignore. The story wasn't about adultery or revenge. It was about a man who built a legacy on silenced women and stolen time. Leela stepped forward the next day. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she told the truth, and she named the trust that now controlled the proceeds from the sales. Adrian's name was attached to the donations. He tried to stop it. He filed injunctions, claimed coercion, claimed theft, but everything had been done by the book, the same book he'd written. The mistress disappeared from his life overnight. Her social media went dark. She stopped answering calls. Later, I learned she'd been advised to distance herself from him, from everything. The final confrontation happened in mediation. Adrian looked like a man waking up in the wrong life. His voice shook when he spoke to me. "You planned this," he said. "Yes." "You lied." "No," I replied. I listened to her. He offered money, properties, silence. I declined, because by then the collection was no longer his, and neither was the narrative. The last item sold on a Friday afternoon. The proceeds finalized the trust. Leela transferred a portion to causes that helped women challenge coercive settlements. The rest, she kept, because it had always been hers. When the divorce was finalized, Adrian walked away with what he'd always feared most: exposure. No criminal charges stuck. He was too careful for that. But reputations don't need convictions to die. His calls stopped being returned. Invitations dried up. The rooms that once parted for him stayed closed. As for me, I started over quietly. Different city, different name, clean accounts. People ask if I regret it, if it was worth the risk. Here's the truth they don't expect. Catching him cheating wasn't the moment my life changed. Catching him underestimating me was. He thought I was just another woman he could outmaneuver. He forgot something important. Collections can be sold, legacies can be rewritten, and the women men discard? Sometimes we compare notes, sometimes we wait, and sometimes we donate everything they thought made them untouchable and walk away richer than we ever were before.